Queen Camilla accused a royal guard. What he revealed completely shattered her image. The palace had always been a place of elegance, history, and tradition, standing tall in the heart of the city like a symbol of power and prestige. Its towering walls, ornate gates, and polished floors told the story of centuries, of kings, queens, and the lives that had unfolded behind its magnificent doors. To the public, it was a place of glamour, celebrations, and grandeur. Tourists would gather outside, cameras ready, hoping for a glimpse of royalty, while the media chronicled every official event, every public appearance with a mixture of awe and scrutiny. Among the royal family, Queen Camilla held a position of respect and admiration. She was often seen walking gracefully through palace corridors, attending charity events, or posing for official photographs with a calm and elegant smile. Her public persona was flawless, poised, dignified, and devoted to her royal duties. Yet behind the golden doors of the palace, life was far from the perfect image the world was shown. Within these walls lived not just royalty, but also a carefully chosen team of staff, each performing their duties with precision. There were butlers, maids, chefs, and a special group of royal guards whose lives were deeply intertwined with the routines and secrets of the palace. Among these guards was a man named James. Unlike the tourists and reporters, he had seen the palace from a perspective no one else could imagine. He had walked the corridors in the quiet of the night, witnessed private conversations, and been present during moments of joy, frustration, and vulnerability that were never meant to be seen by the public eye. James had joined the Royal Guard many years ago, inspired by the sense of duty, honor, and the chance to serve the monarchy. He had undergone rigorous training, learning not only the skills required to protect the royal family, but also the etiquette, patience, and discretion necessary for life inside a palace. Over time, James became a familiar face in the royal household. His colleagues respected him, and he earned a reputation for being loyal and trustworthy. Yet he was not naive. Years of observing palace life had shown him that behind every polished smile and graceful gesture, there were complexities, tensions, and emotions that few outsiders could ever understand. Queen Camilla, like all members of the royal family, had her routines and expectations. She moved through her day with precision, attending meetings, hosting guests, and ensuring that every public appearance reflected the dignity and decorum expected of a queen. Her life seemed perfect, almost like a carefully choreographed performance. But James knew that appearances could be deceiving. He had seen moments when the queen appeared tired, frustrated, or impatient, small cracks in the otherwise flawless facade. These were human moments, normal in any household, but magnified many times over in the eyes of the public. The contrast between public perception and private reality fascinated James. He often thought about the stories the media wrote, the headlines praising or criticizing the queen, and how little they truly knew about the people and events inside those walls. To outsiders, Queen Camilla was elegant and composed, always in control. To James, she was a complex figure, someone who bore the weight of expectations, tradition, and personal ambition, all while trying to maintain a public image that rarely allowed for mistakes or vulnerability. In his daily routine, James interacted with many staff members who also saw the queen in private moments. The maids who helped her prepare for events, the chefs who managed the royal kitchen, and the assistants who coordinated her schedule. They all noticed small details, habits, and moods that never made it to the public eye. Sometimes it was a sigh of frustration when a meeting ran too long, a quiet smile shared with a trusted aide, or a tense word exchanged behind closed doors. These moments were fleeting, often overlooked by everyone except those who lived and worked in the palace every day. James had learned the importance of discretion early on. The palace operated on strict rules of confidentiality. Guards and staff were expected to observe but not speak, to protect the privacy of the royal family at all costs. Breaching this trust was considered a serious offense, and the consequences could be severe. For years, James adhered to these rules, watching and understanding without judgment, knowing that his loyalty was as much about silence as it was about duty. Despite the rules, James could not ignore what he sometimes witnessed. There were situations that made him question what he saw, incidents that left him confused or troubled, even though he never shared them with anyone. The palace was a world of contradictions. warmth and tension, laughter and quiet frustration, perfection on the surface and complexity underneath. James began to understand that the life of a queen, or any royal, was not simply a life of luxury and admiration. It was a life of constant scrutiny, expectation, and careful control, where every action was observed and every mistake could become a headline. As days turned into months and months into years, James developed a keen awareness of the subtle dynamics at play. He noticed how staff members adjusted their behavior depending on which royal was present, how private disagreements were quickly resolved to maintain harmony, and how moments of genuine emotion were often concealed behind masks of courtesy. He saw how Queen Camilla balanced her public responsibilities with personal challenges, navigating a world that expected her to be flawless at all times. There were times when James felt admiration for the Queen. He recognized her dedication, her ability to remain composed under pressure, and her commitment to charity work and public duties. But there were also moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if the carefully maintained image truly reflected the person she was behind closed doors. He realized that the public often judged based on appearances, while the reality was far more complicated. James's observations were not limited to the Queen alone. He saw interactions among all members of the royal household, noting how staff hierarchy influenced behavior, how decisions were made behind closed doors, and how even minor incidents could ripple through the daily life of the palace. These insights gave him a deeper understanding of human behavior, leadership, and the pressures of living under constant observation. Despite the challenges, James remained committed to his role. He took pride in his work, understanding that his position was both an honor and a responsibility. He knew that the palace depended on people like him to maintain order, security, and discretion. Every day brought new challenges, whether it was coordinating security for a high-profile event, managing unexpected situations, or simply observing and learning the unspoken rules of palace life. Over time, James developed a perspective that few outside the palace could ever grasp. He saw that life inside those walls was a delicate balance between duty, loyalty, and personal integrity. The palace was not just a home or workplace. It was a world of traditions, expectations, and hidden truths. And in this world, Queen Camilla, despite her public image of elegance and control, was just as human as anyone else, facing pressures, making decisions, and navigating a complex web of relationships. James often reflected on the contrast between the public image of royalty and the reality he witnessed every day. He realized that stories in the media rarely captured the depth, the nuance, or the personal struggles of those who lived inside the palace. People saw the smile, the dress, the public appearances, but they rarely saw the human being behind the image. And this realization shaped the way James approached his role, as both an observer and a participant, committed to duty but aware of the complexities around him. In many ways, James felt like a guardian of truth, holding knowledge that could never be shared. He understood that every moment, every action, and every observation contributed to a larger story, one that the public could never fully know. And as he walked the palace corridors, he carried both pride and responsibility, knowing that his perspective offered a rare glimpse into a world of elegance, tension, and human complexity. Through all these experiences, James came to see that life inside the palace was not just about protocol and appearances. It was about understanding human nature, navigating relationships, and maintaining a sense of integrity in a world where every action was scrutinized. And while Queen Camilla remained a figure admired by millions, James knew that the reality behind the palace gates was far richer, more complicated, and more human than anyone outside could ever imagine. This was the world James lived in, a world of splendor and secrecy, of admiration and complexity, where every day brought lessons about trust, loyalty, and the fragile nature of reputation. It was a world where appearances could be deceiving, where public images were carefully crafted, and where the truth was often known only to those who walked silently through the palace corridors, observing, learning, and understanding. And for James, it was a world that would forever shape his understanding of the monarchy, the queen, and the delicate balance between public perception and private reality. Life inside the palace had always been structured, disciplined, and predictable, but that stability was suddenly shaken one ordinary morning. James had been on duty as usual, walking the long corridors with measured steps, eyes alert and mind focused. The royal household operated like a well-oiled machine, every person knowing their place, every movement carefully synchronized. But that day, something felt different, a tension in the air that James could not ignore. Whispers had begun circulating among the staff, subtle but persistent, a ripple of unease spreading quietly through the palace. Queen Camilla had summoned James to a private room, a space reserved for confidential discussions with senior staff. The request itself was not unusual. Guards were often called to address security or procedural matters. But the tone of the message, brief and firm, hinted that this was no ordinary conversation. James felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as he approached the room. He had served faithfully for years, witnessing countless events, yet nothing had prepared him for the moment that awaited him. When he entered, he saw Queen Camilla seated with a composed but serious expression. There was a calmness in her posture, yet her eyes carried an intensity that immediately made James aware that the meeting was significant. Without preamble, she addressed him directly, accusing him of misconduct. The words struck like lightning, shocking James to his core. He had always upheld his duties with the highest level of professionalism. He had never faltered in loyalty or responsibility. To hear such an accusation from the Queen herself was bewildering. For a moment, James struggled to find words. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as he tried to process what he was hearing. He could feel the weight of the accusation pressing down, a tension that was almost suffocating. The accusation was specific yet vague, leaving room for interpretation, and James knew that this ambiguity could be dangerous. In the palace, where every word and action was scrutinized, an accusation, even a false one, had the power to disrupt lives, reputations, and careers. James took a deep breath, steadying himself. He responded with clarity and calm, explaining that he had never committed any wrongdoing and that his actions had always been in line with his duties. He spoke with honesty, recounting his adherence to palace rules, his dedication to his role, and his unwavering loyalty. He emphasized that he had always acted in the best interest of the royal household, protecting both the family and the integrity of the institution. Despite his explanation, Queen Camilla remained composed but resolute. The conversation continued, the tension in the room palpable. James could sense that the accusation was not merely about an isolated incident. It carried implications for trust, authority, and perception. He understood that in the world of royalty, accusations were never just personal. They could affect the broader image of the palace, the staff, and the monarchy itself. As the meeting ended, James left the room with a heavy heart. The palace, usually a place of routine and order, now felt uncertain and fragile. Whispers among staff grew louder, curiosity and speculation filling the halls. Every glance, every hushed conversation seemed to carry a hint of the unfolding drama. James knew that he had to navigate this carefully. Any misstep could be amplified, and the truth might be overshadowed by perception and rumor. Over the following days, the atmosphere in the palace shifted noticeably. Staff members walked with caution, conversations were measured, and eyes darted nervously as if everyone were waiting for the next development. James observed all of this with a mix of frustration and determination. He had always been a man of integrity, and now that integrity was being questioned. Yet, he remained committed to doing his duty, even as the uncertainty weighed heavily on him. James also began reflecting on how public perception could diverge so dramatically from reality. Outside the palace walls, people continued to see Queen Camilla as graceful, composed, and flawless. The media reported on her appearances with admiration, often ignoring the behind-the-scenes struggles and tensions that staff like James experienced daily. This dichotomy, the polished public image versus the complex private reality, was at the heart of the palace's inner world. One evening, as James walked through the quiet halls, he encountered some of his colleagues. They shared cautious words of concern, offering support without overstepping boundaries. James realized that many of them had noticed the Queen's unusual behavior, the subtle changes in tone, the way certain instructions were delivered with extra intensity. Yet, like him, they had been careful not to speak openly, understanding the delicate balance of loyalty, discretion, and personal integrity required in their roles. James also thought about the emotional impact of the accusation. He had always respected the Queen and the institution she represented. To be accused of misconduct was not only professionally challenging, but deeply personal. It made him question the assumptions of trust and loyalty he had relied upon for years. How could someone who knew him well, who had seen his dedication and integrity, question his character so profoundly? It was a question that haunted him, even as he continued to perform his duties with unwavering professionalism. Amid the tension, James noticed subtle changes in Queen Camilla herself. The Queen, always composed in public, displayed moments of visible stress and concern in private. Her decision to confront him directly suggested that she was also grappling with pressures that few could understand. James began to see that the accusation, while difficult for him, might also reflect the burdens of expectation, responsibility, and scrutiny that weighed heavily on her. The palace was not just a workplace. It was a stage where every action, word, and decision carried immense significance. As days passed, James carefully documented his own experiences, mindful of the importance of clarity and honesty. He kept notes of his duties, interactions, and observations, ensuring that he had a record of events should his integrity be questioned further. This practice was not out of suspicion alone. It was a way to maintain a sense of control and certainty in a situation that felt increasingly uncertain. James also began to consider the broader implications of the accusation. How would this affect the staff, the daily functioning of the palace, and the public perception of the royal family? He knew that rumors could spread quickly, and once they reached the media, even a minor incident could become sensationalized. The palace had always been adept at managing appearances, but James understood that the human element, the staff, the guards, the people who knew the reality behind the scenes, was just as crucial in maintaining balance and stability. During this time, James faced moments of doubt, wondering if he had misunderstood the situation or if there were unseen factors influencing the Queen's perspective. He reflected on every interaction, every instruction, and every event that might have contributed to the misunderstanding. His goal was not to challenge authority recklessly, but to ensure that truth and fairness prevailed. He understood that navigating the delicate dynamics of the palace required patience, diplomacy, and steadfast commitment to honesty. Amid these challenges, James also found support in small, meaningful ways. Some senior staff discreetly offered reassurance, acknowledging his professionalism and dedication. Their quiet words reminded him that he was not alone, that others recognized his integrity even if the Queen's accusation cast a shadow over his reputation. These moments of solidarity were brief but significant, providing him with the strength to continue performing his duties without faltering. As the tension continued to simmer, James became increasingly aware of the fragile nature of trust within the palace. Trust was a currency more valuable than gold, essential for maintaining harmony, efficiency, and morale. An accusation, even if unfounded, could erode trust in ways that were difficult to repair. James realized that his own actions, patience, and careful communication were key to navigating this delicate situation. The story of that period also highlighted the human side of Queen Camilla. While the accusation created conflict and uncertainty, it also revealed her own vulnerabilities. She was a queen with immense responsibilities, constantly under scrutiny, and expected to uphold a flawless public image. The pressures she faced were extraordinary, and her actions, whether justified or mistaken, reflected the complex interplay between authority, expectation, and personal judgment. Through it all, James remained committed to his role as a royal guard. He continued his duties with precision, ensuring the security and order of the palace, while also navigating the complex emotional landscape that the accusation had created. He maintained professionalism, discretion, and patience, understanding that the resolution of this situation required careful attention, honesty, and resilience. In reflecting on this experience, James also gained insight into the broader dynamics of life inside the palace. The halls, rooms, and corridors were more than just physical spaces. They were arenas where human behavior, relationships, and reputations were constantly tested. Every interaction mattered, every word carried weight, and every decision could have far-reaching consequences. The accusation, difficult as it was, became a lens through which James could better understand the challenges and responsibilities faced by those living and working within these walls. Despite the tension and uncertainty, James continued to observe, learn, and navigate the delicate balance of palace life. He realized that the situation, while challenging, also offered an opportunity to witness the complexities of human behavior, leadership, and loyalty in one of the most scrutinized households in the world. Through it all, he remained committed to truth, integrity, and professionalism, understanding that these qualities were essential not only for his own sense of self, but for the stability and functioning of the palace itself. In the end, this period of accusation and tension marked a turning point for James. It forced him to confront questions of trust, perception, and fairness, while also deepening his understanding of the human side of royalty. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, was also a place of human emotion, complexity, and vulnerability. And as James continued his service, he carried with him the lessons of patience, integrity, and resilience, knowing that navigating the hidden realities behind public appearances required both courage and wisdom. The tension inside the palace had reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. Days had passed since the accusation, and while James continued to perform his duties with careful attention, a storm was quietly building. The whispers among staff had grown louder, the air inside the palace thick with curiosity and unease. Everyone was waiting, expecting the situation to escalate, yet unsure of how it would unfold. James himself felt a growing responsibility, not just to protect his own reputation, but also to be honest about what he had seen and experienced within the palace. One evening, after his shift ended and the corridors were quiet, James sat alone in a small room near the guards' quarters. He reflected deeply on his time serving the royal family, on the years he had witnessed behind-the-scenes moments that no one else could ever see. These were not trivial observations. They revealed the human side of people who were admired by millions, yet lived under immense pressure and scrutiny. James realized that the truth he carried was both powerful and fragile. If shared, it could challenge the public image of someone revered, but if hidden, it left an unfair burden on him and allowed misconceptions to persist. After careful thought, James decided to speak out, but not in anger or with the intent to harm. He would recount the events as they happened, providing a truthful perspective from someone who had been present for countless private moments. The decision was not easy. He understood that revealing these details could create waves in the media, stir public opinion, and even strain relationships within the palace. Yet, the weight of silence had become too heavy. James began to recount specific incidents, first in his own notes, documenting each memory clearly and accurately. He recalled times when Queen Camilla, under the immense pressure of her duties, had shown impatience or frustration. Not out of malice, but from the stress of constant scrutiny and responsibility. These moments, he realized, were often misinterpreted by staff or outsiders when taken out of context. Yet they were real and human. They revealed a queen who struggled privately with decisions, expectations, and the endless demands of her role. One incident stood out vividly in James' mind. It had been during a particularly busy week of official engagements. The Queen had been preparing for a major charity event, and the pressure was immense. Staff members were coordinating logistics, security, and schedules, all while managing the public image of a flawless monarch. In the midst of this chaos, the Queen had become visibly frustrated over a minor error in scheduling. Her voice, usually calm and measured, had carried a sharpness that startled even seasoned staff. James had been nearby, observing quietly, understanding that the frustration was directed at the situation, not at anyone personally. But it was an authentic moment, a glimpse of the human side of royalty that no one outside would ever see. Another memory involved a private conversation between Queen Camilla and her aides about the challenges of public expectations. She spoke candidly about the pressure to appear perfect, to maintain composure even when overwhelmed by fatigue or worry. James had witnessed her vulnerability in that moment, the way she admitted doubts, fears, and moments of uncertainty. It was not weakness, but honesty. It was a side of the Queen that contrasted sharply with the composed, dignified figure the public adored. As James prepared to share these revelations, he also reflected on the delicate balance between truth and discretion. He understood that honesty could have consequences, but the aim was not to damage reputations. Instead, it was to reveal the full picture, the complexities, the pressures, and the very human experiences behind the palace doors. He wanted people to see that royalty, while admired and respected, were not immune to emotion, stress, or imperfection. When James finally spoke, his account was detailed and careful. He described not just the incidents themselves, but the context surrounding them, the schedules, the pressure, the responsibilities that weighed on Queen Camilla and the staff. His narrative did not cast blame. It simply offered insight into the challenges of life inside the palace. He explained how staff navigated these pressures daily, how loyalty and discretion shaped interactions, and how the Queen herself managed the difficult task of being both human and a symbol of the monarchy. The revelations were met with surprise and shock. Staff members who had been aware of some of these moments now saw them in a new light, understanding that frustration or tension was not personal, but part of the larger picture of palace life. James' honesty brought clarity, helping others navigate the subtle complexities that had often been misunderstood. For the first time, some staff began to see the Queen not just as a figure of authority, but as a person grappling with immense responsibility, striving to balance duty and humanity. News of James' revelations eventually reached the public, though carefully filtered through official channels. Journalists and media outlets reported on the behind-the-scenes glimpses with curiosity and fascination. Readers were intrigued to learn about the private struggles of a queen they had long admired, and many were surprised to discover the human side of someone who had always seemed untouchable. The revelations did not seek to tarnish Queen Camilla's image, but they undeniably challenged the idea of perfection often associated with royalty. Public reactions were mixed. Some expressed empathy, recognizing the extraordinary pressures the Queen faced daily. They appreciated the honesty and felt a deeper connection to her as a person rather than merely a public figure. Others were more critical, questioning how moments of frustration or tension could occur in such a prestigious household. The discussions highlighted the complexity of public perception, how admiration, expectation, and human behavior often intersect in unexpected ways. Within the palace, the impact of James' revelations was equally significant. Queen Camilla herself had to confront the reality of her private moments being observed and shared, even if the intent was not malicious. She began to reflect on the pressures she placed on herself and the staff, acknowledging that her role required not only public composure, but also thoughtful consideration of how private behavior influenced perception. It was a moment of self-awareness, one that prompted introspection and a desire to maintain balance in her relationships with staff and the public alike. For James, the experience was transformative. Speaking out was not easy, but it allowed him to reconcile his loyalty with honesty. He had upheld his duty while also providing a truthful account of the complexities within the palace. The process strengthened his understanding of leadership, human behavior, and the delicate balance between perception and reality. He realized that true loyalty sometimes meant telling the truth, even when it was uncomfortable or risky. The staff continued to navigate the aftermath carefully. Relationships were tested, trust was reconsidered, and communication became even more important. James observed these dynamics with a mixture of concern and understanding. He knew that the palace relied on trust and cooperation, and his revelations, though honest, required careful handling to ensure harmony was restored. Slowly, staff members began to adjust, recognizing that transparency and empathy were crucial in managing both internal and external expectations. Through this experience, James also gained a broader perspective on the pressures faced by public figures. He realized that the scrutiny of millions of people, combined with the weight of tradition and duty, created challenges that were difficult for anyone to navigate. Queen Camilla's actions, while sometimes misunderstood, reflected her efforts to balance the demands of her role with her personal humanity. This insight deepened James' respect for her resilience and dedication. The revelations ultimately contributed to a richer, more nuanced understanding of the Queen. No longer seen as merely a symbol of elegance and composure, she was recognized as a person with strengths, vulnerabilities, and the capacity for growth. James' honest account humanized her, showing that even those in positions of immense power experience doubt, stress, and the need for careful judgment. The story resonated not only with palace staff, but also with the public, who began to appreciate the challenges inherent in maintaining both personal integrity and public image. James' courage in sharing his perspective also sparked reflection among others who served the royal household. They began to consider their own experiences, the complexities of loyalty and honesty, and the importance of understanding human behavior beyond surface appearances. The palace, while steeped in tradition, was also a place of learning and growth, where every challenge offered insight into the nature of leadership, trust, and human connection. As days turned into weeks, the palace gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the events of that period left a lasting impact. James continued his duties with renewed focus, aware that his role was more than protecting the family. It was also about understanding, observing, and navigating the intricate dynamics that defined life inside the palace. Queen Camilla, too, carried the lessons learned, reflecting on the importance of empathy, patience, and self-awareness in both her personal and public life. In the end, the revelations did not destroy reputations or relationships. Instead, they offered clarity, understanding, and a deeper appreciation of the human side of royalty. James' honesty, coupled with his loyalty and discretion, helped bridge the gap between perception and reality, allowing both staff and the public to see the Queen in a more complete, authentic light. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, remained a place of complexity, but one in which truth, integrity, and understanding could coexist with duty and expectation. Through it all, James learned a vital lesson, that observing and understanding the human side of those in power was as important as fulfilling his duties. Loyalty did not mean blind obedience. It meant recognizing the truth, acting with integrity, and supporting those you serve in a way that honored both responsibility and humanity. And for Queen Camilla, the experience became a moment of reflection, a chance to acknowledge her own humanity and the realities of those around her, strengthening her ability to lead with both grace and authenticity. The aftermath of James' revelations was a period of profound change within the palace. Life, which had once followed a precise rhythm of routines and appearances, now felt unpredictable and charged with tension. Staff members moved carefully through the corridors, aware that their actions, words, and even expressions could carry unintended meaning. The Queen herself appeared more reflective, sometimes quietly lost in thought as she considered the impact of her behavior and the revelations that had emerged. The palace, while still grand and majestic, had transformed into a space where honesty, trust, and human vulnerability were acknowledged in ways that had rarely been spoken of before. James, meanwhile, found himself navigating a delicate balance. His loyalty to the royal household remained steadfast, yet he now carried the added responsibility of being someone who had spoken truthfully in a world where appearances were everything. He observed every reaction with a keen eye, understanding that the relationships within the palace were being tested in new ways. Staff members who had once relied solely on hierarchy and protocol were now more aware of the need for empathy, transparency, and thoughtful communication. James realized that his role extended beyond duty. He had become a quiet agent of reflection and change within the palace. The public's reaction to the revelations was both intense and varied. Social media was filled with commentary, discussions, and speculation. Some people expressed empathy for Queen Camilla, appreciating the insight into her human side and acknowledging the pressures she faced daily. They recognized that even someone in her position could feel overwhelmed, make mistakes, or show frustration, and that such moments did not diminish her value or capability. Others were more critical, questioning how moments of tension or impatience could occur in such a carefully managed environment. These debates highlighted the complexity of public perception and the difficulty of understanding life in a highly scrutinized institution from the outside. Queen Camilla herself had to grapple with her own feelings during this time. She understood that James' revelations, though honest and not intended to harm, had reshaped the way people viewed her. Publicly, she remained poised and dignified, maintaining her duties and appearances. Privately, however, she engaged in self-reflection, considering the ways her behavior had been perceived. the impact of stress and responsibility on her actions, and the lessons she could learn to navigate her role more effectively. This period of introspection marked a turning point for her, revealing that leadership was not just about maintaining an image, but also about understanding oneself and the people around her. Within the palace, relationships among staff began to shift. The revelation had created a space where honesty and communication were valued more than mere protocol. Colleagues spoke with greater thoughtfulness, listened more carefully, and recognized the importance of empathy in their interactions. James' courage in speaking truthfully had demonstrated that integrity and discretion could coexist, and that acknowledging human complexity did not undermine loyalty. Slowly, a renewed sense of trust and cooperation began to emerge among the staff, replacing the tension and uncertainty that had dominated the palace in the weeks prior. One of the most significant effects of this period was the way it reshaped Queen Camilla's approach to her duties. She began to consider the human side of her staff more deeply, understanding that they, too, faced pressures, responsibilities, and moments of uncertainty. She engaged in conversations that were more personal, showing appreciation for the challenges her staff endured and acknowledging their contributions beyond their official roles. These actions fostered a stronger sense of connection, trust, and respect within the palace, creating an environment that was not only efficient but also supportive and compassionate. The media continued to follow the story, but the narrative evolved. Reporters and commentators highlighted the human side of Queen Camilla, discussing how her responsibilities, expectations, and public scrutiny influenced her behavior. The revelations prompted broader discussions about leadership, stress, and empathy, encouraging audiences to consider the realities behind public images of prominent figures. In this way, James' honesty had not only impacted the palace, but also contributed to a more nuanced public understanding of the monarchy. James, reflecting on the entire experience, realized that courage, honesty, and discretion were not mutually exclusive. He had maintained his professional responsibilities while also ensuring that the truth was acknowledged. This balance had allowed him to preserve his integrity, strengthen relationships, and create a subtle but meaningful shift in the palace's culture. He had learned that loyalty was not blind obedience, but the ability to act thoughtfully, honestly, and responsibly, even in complex and high-pressure situations. The Queen also recognized the value of reflection and self-awareness. She understood that leadership involved more than appearances. It required empathy, humility, and the willingness to acknowledge mistakes or human limitations. This insight influenced her approach to decision-making, interactions with staff, and public engagements. She became more attuned to the experiences of those around her, ensuring that her actions considered both the expectations of the public and the realities of daily life within the palace. Over time, the palace gradually regained a sense of stability. Routines resumed, official events continued, and public appearances were carried out with the expected elegance and precision. Yet beneath the surface, the lessons learned during this challenging period endured. Staff members were more aware of the importance of communication, trust, and understanding. Queen Camilla approached her role with renewed insight, balancing the demands of public life with a recognition of her own humanity. James continued to serve faithfully, respected for his integrity and for the clarity he had brought to a difficult situation. The story of this period became a quiet testament to the importance of honesty, empathy, and human connection. It illustrated that even in institutions steeped in tradition, formality, and scrutiny, the acknowledgement of vulnerability and truth could create meaningful change. The palace, while still a symbol of power and grandeur, became a place where reflection, understanding, and growth were recognized as essential components of leadership and service. James' experience also underscored the broader lesson that appearances are often incomplete representations of reality. The public may see a polished image, a composed figure, or a flawless performance, but the true story is often far more nuanced. Understanding this complexity requires attention, empathy, and the willingness to look beyond surface impressions. James had gained this understanding firsthand, and it guided him in every decision, observation, and interaction within the palace. As weeks turned into months, the palace found a new rhythm, one that incorporated lessons from the challenging period of accusation and revelation. Trust, communication, and empathy became integral to staff interactions. The Queen continued her public duties with grace and professionalism, but she also embraced a more human approach to leadership, acknowledging the challenges, vulnerabilities, and efforts of those around her. The palace, while still magnificent and ceremonious, had evolved into a place where integrity, reflection, and understanding were valued alongside tradition and protocol. James continued his work with renewed purpose, aware that his role went beyond security and procedure. He became a quiet observer and guide, supporting the palace with both dedication and insight. His experiences had taught him that courage, honesty, and professionalism could coexist, and that even in the most scrutinized and traditional institutions, the acknowledgement of truth and humanity could foster meaningful change. The public, too, benefited from the revelations. They began to view Queen Camilla not merely as a distant figure of authority, but as a person navigating the complexities of life under constant observation. The story prompted discussions about the pressures faced by public figures, the realities of leadership, and the importance of empathy and understanding in judging human behavior. In this way, the lessons learned within the palace extended far beyond its walls, influencing broader perceptions and conversations. Ultimately, the period of accusation, revelation, and reflection became a defining chapter in the lives of both James and Queen Camilla. It demonstrated that challenges, when approached with honesty, integrity, and thoughtfulness, could lead to growth, understanding, and stronger relationships. The palace, with all its history, tradition, and grandeur, had become a place where truth, empathy, and reflection were recognized as essential elements of life within its walls. Through it all, James realized that the true measure of loyalty and service was not simply obedience or silence, but the ability to act with integrity, courage, and care. Queen Camilla, in turn, embraced a deeper awareness of her own humanity and the realities of those around her, balancing her role as a queen with the understanding that perfection was neither possible nor necessary. Together, their experiences created a quiet but lasting transformation, illustrating that even in the most formal and scrutinized environments, the human side of life, honesty, empathy, reflection, and understanding, remains the most powerful and enduring force of all. By the end of this chapter, the palace had regained its dignity, the staff had strengthened their trust, and the public had gained a richer, more nuanced understanding of the queen they admired. The story of James and Queen Camilla became a subtle but profound reminder that behind every image of perfection lies a human story, full of complexity, emotion, and the potential for growth. And for those who lived and worked within the palace, the lessons of that time, integrity, courage, empathy, and reflection, would continue to shape their actions, relationships, and understanding of what it truly meant to serve and lead in a world of scrutiny and expectation.